Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
Welcome. My name is Koji, and this is episode number 15 of the Guy Code. So even though I'm a writer and have a bunch of podcasts, I tend to keep my true feelings to myself. And I think it drives people around me, like my wife, crazy because she doesn't know what's going on in my head. But I think I think it has a lot to do with the way I was raised. I was raised in a very traditional Asian family where we're not very expressive. We don't tell each other we love each other. In fact, I think I only told my mother I loved her once in her entire life. So that makes me really sad. And so, I think that's why when my guest, Sandra, right here, when she came and she thought of this advice around communication, I thought this was a perfect thing for us to talk about. So as you can see, I brought on the amazing actor, Sandra Santiago. Hi, Sandra.
Hello, thank you for having me in your show.
No problem.
I'm very happy to be here.
Great. And Sandra, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I grew up in Mazatlan, Mexico. Well, in a little town, it's called Villa Union. And I'm the only one in my family who chose this career as an entertainer. No wonder why. I've been around quite a bit. I traveled the world, and I decided for a long time not to be an entertainer. I felt that choosing that path I will encounter a lot of pain, and I didn't want to go through that route. But not doing that path caused me in my life so much pain that finally I gave the permission to follow that path. So I've been in LA for many years. I study at the Beverly Hills Playhouse, and you mean it, with the best coaches here in LA, and I keep training, and it's just part of it's a part of life.
Yes.
I have a son too, like you yourself, and he's an athlete, and I find myself that I am an athlete, but in another field. I'm an entertainer, and I have to keep training my muscles, my vocal cords, my body, my everything, my movement.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm happy to be an entertainer.
Great. And I see you on Facebook on red carpets and stuff. And I think that's awesome and amazing. All your work. I've seen your work and I think it's amazing. So I don't like, or I don't comment on things, but I'm there watching everything. So don't worry. I'm cheering you on from the side always. So, one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is because I want to give advice to my son, but he's 8 years old. So he thinks he already knows more than me. So I think that this podcast is partly for me to be able to gather advice from people I respect and people I know. And that in the future, when he's ready for it, he could hear some of this advice and he could, and hopefully grow and learn from it. So let's talk about communication. So what's your first piece of advice?
My first piece of advice
around communication. Yeah.
Yes. My first piece of advice about communication is that it's always better to communicate, instead of not communicate. If you're thinking, I should not say anything, it's not a good idea. You always have to talk and say what you really want and need. And because if you don't do that, the other person will not know. And I lived in Japan for many years, and that was one thing that I didn't really understand. People don't talk much. You think it's more like in a culture that you already know what the other person is going to do or expect from you. But I realized that it's very important to communicate and find out what is needed and wanted from you.
I love that. And you're totally right about Japan. I mean, I remember I worked for this Japanese company and the boss would walk in the room and say, man, I wish I could photocopy this. And because he wanted somebody else to photocopy it for him, but he couldn't tell somebody to photocopy it. It's so frustrating. It's just like, say what's on your mind, so I love that piece of advice. So my first piece of advice is be careful what you say to the people you love, because you never know. Like, for example, the last thing I said to my father was not kind words. I was kind of angry. I was a kid and I was angry, and then he ended up passing away. And so you just never know what you're going to say to people and what it could be the last thing you could say to them. So I think you should always think about what you're saying to somebody and how it affects them, but also that it could, you never know, it could be the last thing you said. And I spent the rest of my life thinking about those words and saying how, like, I wish I could do anything to take back those words. I mean, obviously I didn't mean it, I didn't mean to be mean, but as a teenager, I wasn't thinking about the effect my words could have on him,
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
yeah, I totally duplicate that feeling. So we have to do our best every day and thinking that it's the last time we see that person.
Yeah.
I think it's a good advice.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be a bad thing. Yeah, let me hear your next one.
That,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, another one that I really think is very important about communication is acknowledging the person when the person finished talking. Let's say if you're just finished talking right now. So I say, I got it. Thank you for letting me know. Yes, I heard you. It's just like, I heard you. I care for you. I understand. I may not feel the same way you feel regarding this subject, but I totally duplicate what you're saying, or I understand what you're saying. And it's just a way to grant beingness to the other person, meaning like understand that the person there is in front of you and not thinking that you're just talking to yourself. So it's very important to acknowledge a communication when it's given to you.
You seem like you seem like a great communicator. Are you a great communicator in your relationships?
I try my best. But I do have a son, and I know that when he doesn't answer the phone, again, you get worried because the person is not communicating, he's not answering. So it's always good to be in communication, to say, hey, I'm fine, I'm here.
Yeah.
And acknowledge if you receiving a communication, because the other person might think, oh, he doesn't care for me, or he's not listening, or he or she is not listening to me. I'm not important for them. So, yeah.
Wow, that's great. And actually, it's very similar to my piece of advice, which is to listen to people. I'm not great at listening to people. I'm terrible at listening, but I think you can learn a lot about a person by listening. You could hear what they're saying. You could really get to know them as people. But also, I think when you're focused only on talking and not listening, you don't develop strong relationships with people, because they know that you're not listening to them. And if they know that you're not listening to them, they're not going to listen to you, or they don't think you care. So I think it's really, really important to listen. And this is a piece of advice I'm terrible at. I'm always thinking and not listening. So I have to work. This is something I definitely have to work on. Actually, all of these I have to work on a lot stronger. So this is all terrible. A good advice for me, but I'm terrible at. So let me hear your next piece of advice. What's your next piece of advice?
It's like, like sometimes, like when you feel like a person didn't hear you, you have to keep talking to that person. The person may have not heard you. The person may have been in front of you, but her mind will have maybe been going to the beach, or she's surfing, or he or she is surfing right now, and you're thinking, hey, do you hear blah blah? And the person is like, tells you something else. Just be kind and just ask the same question again until you get the answer. Just keep going. It's like knocking the door, they're not opening. Hello, I'm here. Hey, hello, excuse me? Can you hear me? I'm here. Do you hear me knocking on your door? I'm sorry, but I'm here. Hello. So do not give up, because sometimes people have their own problems, and you know what? one moment they could not be there, but another moment they might be there. You know, one way or another, if you keep communicating, you will get an answer.
That's funny, because I think if you're knocking on the door, people are probably more likely to answer the door than if I'm knocking on the door. So if it's me, they're not going to answer the door, but if it's you, they'll answer the door for you. Sure. Okay. Let me see.
I think it's very important to keep asking a question. If you need something, like if I live next to you and I need something from you, I will have to keep going again and again until I get what I need. And we will get that, I think.
No, I agree. I think that's really good, because I think sometimes people, they get shy or they get nervous, and then they don't think that their things are important to them. You know, because I know some guys aren't okay about asking questions or asking for help. You know,
I know. It's like, I remember when I used to live in Japan, like for a man to ask for direction, it was like something like forbidden. Yeah. And I was like, huh? But at that time, I didn't have all the knowledge that I have about communicating with people and understanding people. But I learned a lot because I love to ask questions. And I remember I used to ask my Japanese beautiful teacher that he passed away, and he was like my mentor coach in Japanese life. And he kept saying, no, they're not thinking that way. And I was thinking, no, maybe they don't like me. Maybe because they were not communicating with me. You know, so I guess the only way to find out is to ask questions, not to assume. And a lot of times we assume things. We think like, oh yeah, that person really cares for me, or the person really likes me, or the person really wants to do something. And that really, you know, it's not happening. It's like, it's only in your imagination.
Yeah, I really like that. I have I have similar advice to that, which is, you know, you have to kind of know your audience when you communicate with people. Like, so if you're, you know, for example, like if you're at a funeral, you don't tell jokes, right? Or if you're at a party, you don't tell, like, you know, you don't talk about death or something, right? You try to, you have to, and I think that's the same way in relationships. It's like, there's a different kinds of conversation that you can have, and you have to kind of know the conversation you're having and when you're having it. And I think that's something that's really, really important to me, because I have random, because I'm a writer. So I think about things all the time. And I think that when I was a kid, I would just write I would talk about weird things all the time. And so I think I think it's important that you know the right time to say things and the wrong time to say things, you know? And I think that's really, really important.
Totally. I do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I remember, actually, a funny story is at my mother's wedding, she got a second wedding after my father passed away, his second wedding, this guy was up there talking for like 20 minutes and telling jokes. And I was just like, why are you telling jokes? I mean, it's like, it's okay because it's a fun thing, but it was just a really odd like time to do it. And I just didn't understand why he was up there, because he wasn't family and he wasn't like close family or friends or anything. And he was just going on and on, like he's a comedian telling jokes at a party, but he's not funny. And it was very odd. So I always think about that as knowing the right time for things. And that definitely was not the right time. But what's your...
I can add something to that.
For sure.
And see, right now, I didn't acknowledge what you said. You see that? Do you hear that? That I didn't acknowledge what you said? I wanted to speak first and see how the feeling is. It's like, feel like, oh, she kind of cut my communication. Did you see that? Do you feel it?
Yeah, I did feel it.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes we are not aware and we do it. And because we just want to speak first. We just want to be heard. I was like, excuse me, the person hasn't finished talking or just finished talking. So you just say, okay, I got it. But right now I didn't do that. So it makes you feel weird, isn't it? So I'm sorry for that.
No problem.
So one thing that I can add in what you said right now is about when somebody's communicating and communicating and blah, 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 and talking and talking and talking and talking, that is not communication. That person is not communicating. He's just like bursting some stuff that, you know, nobody wants to hear or nobody's listening to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something that I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's what I do when I was, especially younger, less now, but when I was younger, I would just talk so much that I'm not really listening. I'm not really interacting with people, because it's just me talking constantly. And I think that was something that I really had to learn as I got older. Actually, when I became a father is when I really learned it, because all of a sudden my voice is not as important as it was before. Because now it's my kid. Yeah, I have to listen, and it's my kid's voice that's more important than my voice, obviously. So, but yeah. So what's your next piece of advice?
Well, it's just to be there, be willing to experience anything that is coming out of the other person's mouth. Sometimes, like you said, you are in a situation that somebody's not acting properly, and you have to be there because he's the millionaire that is putting all the money in your campaign, or he's the boss, or she's your wife or your husband's mom or dad. And sometimes, you know, you really need to just be there comfortably and being able to just be there and understand that they may have not the same knowledge or the same experience that you have, or education that you have, and they don't know, and that's all. They just don't know, and who are you to criticize them?
No, I like that. Yeah, I like that, because there's a lot of miscommunication sometimes between people when they're not on the same page of things, right? I've had that before. Yes. Okay, so here's my next one: is there are stupid questions that there are stupid questions. No, that's like my thing, because you know, a lot of teachers say there are no stupid questions, but I think that there are stupid questions. And sometimes I think a lot of times I think that you have to think before you speak, because a lot of times the question you're about to ask are questions that are clear already. And so I think, and I'm not saying that questions are bad in general, because I think it's okay to ask for help, and I think it's okay to ask for questions. But I do think that sometimes people, instead of thinking for themselves, they just ask questions, or they keep talking and they're not paying attention to things. And a lot of times it's just a matter of taking a breath and taking 1 second to think about it. And then if you still don't get it, it's okay. But I think that a lot of times, you know, people are, and I do this too. I ask, instead of having to think for my own, I could just ask a lot of questions until I get my answer. But that's sometimes not really the best way to communicate, because it's almost like I'm just talking until I find my place where I'm trying to go, you know. So there are stupid questions.
Yes, and I think they're stupid because the person was not there.
Yeah.
She or he was not listening to.
Yeah.
The person was not, you know, willing to duplicate what you were saying.
Yes.
And aren't we all, you know, guilty of that? Like being in school, that you are there and then you don't really want to be at school, and just like looking at the teacher, but you're not there. And then you ask the stupid question because you were not there. You were not. Yeah. Yeah.
Or in a relationship, and you're like, you're not listening, and then you ask a question that she's already been talking about, because it's just, you weren't listening, right? That's like a common thing. That happened to me a lot when I was dating. I would zone out.
Oh my God, you had a lot of trouble, huh?
I would just be like, oh, what were you saying? You know, like.
I did have my own share about that, and I keep having it. First, because sometimes the miscommunication because of a language, of a culture, has to, you know, a lot has to be with that. I used to be an interpreter before I became an actress, and mainly that's what I got paid for. because I knew different cultures and I understood how one culture behave and the other one behave. And so I was the middleman to get them together and understand what they really needed and wanted. Yeah.
Was it, when you were in Japan, was it tough, the communication, to be like the cultural part of the communication? Was that challenging?
At the beginning, yes, but then I became like a chameleon. I became part of that community. So I was always a gaijin, they call it gaijin to the foreigners, but I was able to adapt myself so well that I was part of the group. Yeah. I felt at the beginning, I felt like I was against the water, against the river, the flow of the river. I was against the river. So I decided just to go with the river, And my trip there and my experience there was amazing. So that's a piece of advice that I have for people, is that sometimes the cultures can be difficult to understand because you didn't grew up and in that culture. So, but if you're patient and you understand, you will figure out, you'll find a way to communicate. I remember when I lived in Japan, there was I got a goosebumps. There was an American teacher. She used to teach English in Japan, and she used to compare Americans and Japanese. She used to compare both of the cultures as a peach. She said that the Americans were like very soft from the outside, but you couldn't get inside because it was very hard. Yeah. But the Japanese, they were the opposite. It was very hard to get outside, but the inside was very soft. So yeah, so it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I can see that. I was able to like understand what she meant by that. So
yeah, that's interesting that you're talking about when you're in Japan. Because when I've been in Japan, it's really hard for me because I look Japanese.
Yes.
And then but the way I speak is it's too American, because it's too in your face. Yeah, impolite.
Impolite. Yes.
Like I remember I liked a girl and I asked her on a date and she said, "Oh no, like why are you asking me on a date?" Like it was like too much. It was too forward, right? It's too American. That's not how you did it in Japan, and it was very shocking for them to see me. So I think it was always a very interesting cultural experience, because I'm American, because I'm fourth generation Japanese American, so I've been here.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. You are American. Yes.
I'm American,
and they see you as that, even though you look Japanese, but when you are over there, they listen to you as like, he's not one of us.
No, not even. I don't have to talk. I mean, I remember I was on a beach.
Yeah.
And I didn't say a single word, and all the kids made fun of me because just the way I was walking was very American. Not even just, and like I was like, wow, I can't believe I walk American. I think it's the way you strut, the way you move. It's different than.
It's just since you're a kid, you are impregnated in a culture.
Yeah.
It's like Latin. I'm Latin. I think I was born dancing. I came out of the womb dancing. I'm too much in Japan. I'm small for Americans, like my size and everything. But over there, I was like, wow. So it's kind of like, it's just part of the culture. Yeah. And you have to adapt yourself in the area where you are if you really want to communicate with people. If not, you will not be able to communicate. Yeah. And that's why we have problems around the world with politicians, because we just want them, we want other countries to see our point of view, but we are not willing to see the other country's point of view about anything. It's just a matter of understanding that somebody can see something like this in different color. It might be, it's orange. But for another person in another country will be, this is like a reddish. Yeah. It's red. I was like, really? No, it's orange. Can you sense? So it's kind of like trying to figure out a way to communicate and understand.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, do you have last advice? The last advice for communication? Anything else?
Just be, well, I can say just be happy, but I know sometimes it's hard for a lot of people just to be happy. But I think I I found out, and I'm so happy that I found out that before I die, that I wanted to entertain people because I want them to be happy. And for me, um, like I remember when my grandpa died, I wanted to dance. Isn't it weird? And because my grandpa liked me to be happy, and I thought that my grandpa would be happy if I was happy.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with my dad. My dad passed away. Of course, I was sad, but inside of me, I just wanted to go and dance. So I think, now we having this experience as the pandemic around the world, and maybe it's a good thing for all of us. It's a good thing to be at home, communicate with people that you didn't communicate before, to call people and tell them that you love them, or just try to be a little bit happier than before, and just see that like life is just it's a game. These bodies,
Yeah.
we're gonna disappear sooner or later, and if we want to believe in like our spirit is gonna come back in another body, it's good. If we don't want to believe that, it's fine. But just try to do your best so you can be happy, because if you're happy, everything goes okay. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that. I love that, how you brought that to COVID and what's going on in the world now. Because I do
Yeah.
think it's like, it is important, especially with the world as it is now, with all the craziness out of Washington and all the craziness going around the world in politics and in social stuff. I think that's really, really important. I think a lot of people lose sight of that too. Like we're just stuck in our homes and can't go to our markets or whatever, or can't go shopping. And so I think we
We
forget
can
that.
decide, it's I think we human beings, we can decide, and that's a good thing that we have. Like we can decide to either be happy or not happy.
Yeah.
You understand? It's like, what is gonna cost me to do that? What it costs me to feel like, okay, I'm gonna have a good day today. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have a miserable day today. It's not like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know I really appreciate, hearing your pieces of advice, and I'm going to have to take some of it I'm going to have to learn some of these skills that you taught me. But I'll have to practice it and get better. But thank you so much for coming, and thank you everyone for listening to this podcast. And Sandra, where can people follow you? Where can people get to know what you're working on?
and in Instagram, in Twitter, in Facebook, Sandra Santiago, and I have a film right now that is streaming on online. It's The Truth Can Smile with Brian Cox. He just won a Golden Globe, and he's in this TV show Succession. So I'm very proud of that film.
And
so,
where can people see that film?
If you go to www.thattruthcansmile.com, you will find all the information there, because you can watch it anywhere around the world now through this computer thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm gonna have to go rent it or buy it or watch it for sure.
I think it's a piece of art. Not only the actors are amazing, but the director of photography, he's just a magician with the camera, and the scenography is just gorgeous. So you have to watch it. Also, he has oh my God, the message is perfect for what we're going through right now.
Oh, okay.
So you have to watch it.
I will. I'll watch it. And for everybody listening, I'll put a link on the notes so you guys could see. You guys could go right to the link. We appreciate it. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. This is a labor of love. This is an opportunity, not just for my son to hear advice, but for everybody to get some of this advice, because I think we could all become better human beings. All right. thank you, everybody. Oh, look, my hand is missing. There's my hand.
Yeah,
thank you.
ありがとうございました。
Arigato.